Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 42, Jerry Stackhouse episode, but more importantly, the ape of the Ape and Bird NFT show has returned. Steve, at day 25, welcome to the first show of 2023. Welcome back, my friend. It is a pleasure to see your face again and to hear your voice.
Thank you for that warm welcome. No one has ever said it was a pleasure to hear my voice. I've said this many times, I've got a face for radio and a voice for mine. But thank you very much. It is good to be back after 6 months. I've been touching a lot of grass. That came out wrong. Not smoking weed, just touching grass. So yeah, it's really good to be back in the saddle. And talking to your lovely face and voice as well.
Yes, well, we've missed you. I don't think we had a show for maybe the first 2 months of the year, and then we launched it back up in maybe around March, and it's been an interesting time. I feel like the TLDR has been keep the show alive, and probably over the last 6 or 7 weeks we've had some interesting guests. But it is tough to research those guests on a weekly basis and get them through. So I'm glad to see you back. I think we can get a few guests on in the coming weeks as well to chop it up with us. But tell us what has been happening in your world. NFTs are at 0, which is great. So you've come back at a good time. Please tell us how you're traveling.
Well, before that, just a big thank you to you and just getting all these guests on, how much work you've been doing in this space with all the articles, all these podcasts. You're at UpsideDAO now. You're just crushing it in this bear market. So I hope only awesome things when we end this bear market and you are well paid out in the future because you are putting in the hard yards. So me personally, for this first 6 months of the year has been quite difficult. So not many people know, but my mother had pancreatic cancer. She's fought it for 5 years. At the start of the year, we were told, got a bit of time left now. We were lucky enough that we could do palliative care at home, and she passed away in March. So it's been a very difficult start to the year, and that's why I went away from this for a while. I was still working on NFTeams. I was still on Twitter doing everything. But yeah, a very tough start to the year for me. But back in it now and really excited to be talking to you every week or other week whenever we can get it going.
Well, I did know that news, which you
and
shared
thank you
with
for
me,
your support over the past little bit too.
No, commiserations once again. I mean, I don't even know how to frame it. It's just horrendous. But it's good to see you back. And for our listeners, you now know the story. But I also told Steve earlier today that he owed no explanation of why he wasn't on the show. That was off Steve's own bat to share that news. But I hope your family is doing it best as it can at this horrible time.
Yeah, look, she was everything good in me. She is what did that. She was always so supportive of everything I did, even though she did not understand anything to do with IT. And I still remember telling her about the Bored Ape and about $5 million offers, and the look of puzzlement on her face. It was just amazing. But she never said so. She always was just like, you always do the right thing. It's like, I'm sure you know what you're doing. Evidently, I didn't, but she was just great. And yeah, it's a really big loss. But we were very fortunate to have 5 years. And every Christmas, I remember I would think this is the last chance Christmas I get to spend with her. And it just kept going, and then I just thought, well, she's such a fighter, we're going to have more and more. But eventually it had to end, and we had some great moments together at the end as well, being at palliative care at home. So yeah, and that's pretty much all I'll say about it. And just thanks to everyone. I know you're going to understand while I was away from here, but yeah, let's get on with the show, I say.
Let's do it. Let's get into it. All right. Well, let's talk about NFTeams. You did mention you sort of like keeping that afloat, and it's interesting when I was even speaking to a guy named Jim Borger this morning, Steve, who's the CEO of Web3 Sense, a sort of analytics tool that's sponsoring Carly Riley's Overpriced JPEGs show at the moment, and he was asking me about the AO Art Ball, and he was showing me a little bit of a screenshot of how they dig in with their APIs and all kinds of analytics. And I was just getting a little bite-sized preview. But he said, oh, look, and I said, hang on, stop. I said, see that NFTeams? Because he said, I see you do a podcast. I said, yeah, it's the greatest podcast in the world. It sort of like goes Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, Ape and Bird shows from what I've heard. But a lot of crossover with AO Art Ball holders and NFTeams, which I'm sure you're very familiar with anyway, Steve. But the reason I brought that up is your project, NFTeams, I'm still a holder as well. I think I still have 6 teams. This has been an absolute brutal bear market. And we, from an NFT perspective, we're going to get onto general crypto in a second. But your project, I always describe as sticky, and it's got a great combination of sort of just sports fans and NFT enthusiasts in general. You have been around now since what? You did those mint passes in September 2021. Was it around that time?
Yeah, I think in a few months we're coming up on 2 years since I started working on the project. So it has been a very long time.
That is incredible when you think about how many projects have just gone and fallen by the wayside, and through a lot of personal adversity this year as well, and you're still going. What kind of mental illness do you have to keep this going?
I just like pain. I think I've said it before. One of my very few strengths is patience. I can wait for things. I've sat on Bitcoin for a decade. I just, in all my investing as well, I always have a 10-year horizon on whatever I do. And my life has been these 10-year little things. So in my 20s, it was uni, but if you read my blog, it was also online casinos that I was playing all their bonuses. In my 30s, it was sports betting and making money from that. And pretty much right on when I turned 40 was when the NFT craze started. And until I'm 50 at least, I'm going to be here. So I could be here just typing on Twitter and getting into arguments with people, or I can try to actually help grow the ecosystem, build something. So I'll be here. I still get excited by what can be built with this technology. I would love to be able to, I've got lots of crazy ideas about other things, but I'm in NFTeams, and until the very end or the very win of it, I'll be here. So just from our community as well, we're all still here. And you're right, they're sports lovers who sort of found NFTs when I was talking about it, doing the YouTubes, sending emails out to my mailing list. So there's like NFT talk in our Discord, there's sports talk, and then of course we run the competitions, giving away 10,000 in T1 and a couple of ETH every other week in T2. So yeah, they're still going. We get, I think it's about in between 45 and 60% participation rate in round 1 of our tournament. So there's probably about 5 to 750 people still participating in our ecosystem. But yeah, so I think it's doing pretty well in this bear market. The fact that we give money back every month probably keeps a lot of people interested. But yeah, in regards to the business, we took in, I think I've mentioned this before, we took in about 800 ETH, 450 ETH went straight to the community fund. I'm actually doing my tax. I've got to get that done by the end of the month for the last financial year, and that's one whopper of a tax bill. But I built with what was left after paying the tax. So a couple of 100,000 on over the 2 years, which has been quite difficult. I've been paying myself zero, of course, but we did have some employees. So I had to make the tough decision to cut burn, like to almost zero. So we let go of our programmer, Brian. Alan, who, if anyone's in the community knows who Alan is, Maria, who I still remember Christmas time, we're doing our first merch drop. The merch guys were like, look, we promised we would have it in everyone's hands by Christmas, but we're going to break that promise. Alan said, where's your warehouse? Drove there, picked them up. Every Sydney order he personally drove to and dropped them off just so people got it at Christmas. And then he was a great project manager and just a good friend to have. So he's still around. He said he would help where he can. He understands. And hopefully when we get more funding by selling players, I'll be able to get him back on board. And then T-Bar, who was our Discord manager and still is. I have to stop paying him, but of course, he's probably the best Discord manager in this entire space. And I've been in a lot of Discords, but he's also stayed on just as a community member. So it's been tough, but I just keep building, keep trying to get the word out. I'm about to get very loud with these guys in the back, the players. They're actually, I think next week we're going to render all 10,000 of them. The final time we've rendered probably 100,000 over the past year to test and fix all the little errors. But it takes about half an hour to render one of these guys with the animation and a 3D file and all that sort of stuff. So that's next week. And then I'm going to be doing, like, trying to sell out an NFT drop in this market with a project that's not really known or big enough is unlikely. So I've been building this, trying to incorporate from day one. I knew I was going to try to incorporate the Yuga ecosystem with other side and so on. That's why we have 100 Bored Ape teams. We have a Bored Ape in the community fund. So I'm sure people have been hearing about all this ApeCoin DAO voting that's going on and how the DAO hasn't really been doing much. I'll be trying to get some ApeCoin from the DAO by creating an AIP. So I hope a lot of people that have ApeCoin get behind that, and I'll release all the information about players and what we're building in that. And finally, I've been ranting for a while. We won SideQuest, which was put on by Consensus. For those who don't know Consensus, they own MetaMask. Just saying MetaMask, I know there's going to be spam in our comments now on YouTube. But they also own Infura and a lot of other big businesses in the space. They put on a sort of grants program for NFT projects. And I believe 3,000 entered. There were 6 prizes. NFTeams won one of those prizes. So we got a $10,000 grant. But it's all the other stuff. It's the connections and so on that has got me excited. But yeah, so still building, still here, 9 till 9 every day pretty much. It's tough, but yeah, pretty much now a single founder who has hourly rate employees or contract workers working when I need them. But yeah, the next big thing is this player drop, which we're very, very close to being able to do.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to over the coming weeks digging into that a little bit more. And congratulations for just continuing to grind it out. It's obviously not easy for anyone, but you described your strength as patience, but I would say resilience too. So here's to NFTeams and shout out especially to T-Bar and Alan. I didn't know the third person you mentioned. Was it Brian, did you say?
Brian, yeah.
Yeah, so shout out to those guys. Definitely know Alan and T-Bar. T-Bar is a Discord mod in another community that I'm into, and I agree with you.
He's in about 10.
He's the best in the biz for sure. I want to ask you before we get on to crypto bouncing, now that you've had you're still in the weeds with your project, and you mentioned your 10-year time horizon essentially for NFTs, and making these almost like decade bets on, where things go, and almost like this skating to the puck mentality, skating where the puck's going to be mentality. Do you have more, less, or are you neutral on conviction than you had, let's call it, at the end of last year, when you and I and Ben and Bergs did that collaboration show to wrap up 2022, when you now think we're on June 23rd, 2023, 6 months, 7 months since that show, more conviction, less conviction, or the same, neutral?
In NFTs or in the entire market?
Let me rephrase, not just in terms of your overall conviction for digital assets, let's call it, like not necessarily Moonbirds and Azukis and Doodles and Clone X, like the stuff that we've lived and breathed the last 2 years. Just in general, is your conviction higher, lower, or the same?
I think it's the same as it's always been. Once you sort of go down the rabbit hole and understand about digital asset ownership, I think it's a foregone conclusion that this NFTs and digital ownership are a thing. There's no doubt about it. The use cases are still being built out. We're testing every single day with new use cases. I'm probably a bit disappointed in the speed of getting things out. It seems fairly stagnant, but that's also because why would you release anything in a bear market sort of thinking that happens? But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind, if what was 10 years from 2030, we're laughing that people even thought this industry or this technology wouldn't be a thing that everyone has and nearly every single person owns a digital asset. It's, in my mind, it's a foregone conclusion just based on what kids today do with their time. The fact that an old man like me is really interested in it. And yeah, like for me, no change at all. And I don't see there being a change.
Yeah. I'm probably as bullish as I've been in the height of the the bull market. And that's not on obviously my own bags, because they're very bearish. And have been for the last.
I can't wait to talk about Moonbirds.
Well, I think the listeners have had that to death for the last couple of months. But I think overall, and maybe we'll get into it later in the show, Steve. But the things that are coming out with like Dot Swoosh and the announcements with EA Sports and Fortnite this week, and even sort of just seeing what music NFTs is starting to do, like just bubbling away with some people experimenting, like. It just is, to your point before, it's a foregone conclusion in my head that digital assets matter. It's just going to be like which ones. And it's almost like it's such a hard conversation, I feel like, in the sense of when you say the acronym NFT, most people think Bored Ape, CryptoPunks, Moonbirds, like whatever. And so everyone just immediately goes to that. But it's almost, to me, it's almost like when the internet first started, and it's like, you would say like, well, it's just a newspaper, right? You just go and read the newspaper online. But then, now we stream stuff, and we're doing this Riverside thing and recording a podcast, and we got through a world pandemic thanks to like internet apps essentially. And there's online dating, and there's, online casinos, and all these kind of things. There's all these like verticals, and it just reshaped the way that we not only interacted, but we did commerce with one another. And just for me, it's just like a foregone conclusion. And I just think that people that have been in the space for a while, we just constantly think of, well, if Moonbirds or Azuki or Bored Ape floor is up, then NFTs are doing well. But if it's going down, then it's all going away. But it's just the different asset types that are
Exactly. In 3 to 5 years, the PFP market will be 5% of the NFT market. And of course, they won't be called NFTs anymore. It's just the current name that all us nerds have been calling it from the start. But yeah, there'll be other use cases, and we've talked about them many times on the podcast early on as well. It's just a matter of time, and things go in waves. The current wave is AI stuff, but and crypto's slowly picking up because of, and we're going to talk about it soon with BlackRock and ETFs and all that stuff. But things go in waves. At the moment, only the true believers are still here. But as soon as, sadly, the price picks up, it will bring others in. And it will only take one, I think we've mentioned this before, it'll take one company, maybe Apple, with their provision or whatever, coming out and saying, well, you get digital assets with whatever you do, and then you're off to the races. But yeah, it takes a while. I think, and I told you this a bit earlier, I think we're still in for a bit more blood before it does come back. But yeah, my views on the market have not changed at all.
Yep. All right. Well, speaking of green, because we're talking a lot about the red in the NFT market, crypto has had a bit of a bounce. So it almost felt like a week ago or so that, crypto's dead, and like the SEC is coming after Coinbase and Binance and this and that. And then all of a sudden this week, Steve, obviously because you were returning to this show, we have seen
I had it set up.
Quite a nice bounce, a bit of green. Give us your thoughts.
My thoughts are crypto goes up, crypto goes down. The fact that we think that, so what was it? Start of the year or just before, it got to 16, 17,000 US dollars. The fact that we think we're in a bear market when Bitcoin is trading at 24,000. I remember 2020 and it went down to $3,000. That was the bear market. The fact that we all think that in 2.5 years, it's gone up 9x, and we all think this is a bottom. How can you complain? It's people that got in during the hype phases that are cranky. I'm looking at this going, wow, how is it 24, 25, and now 30,000? So to me, I just seen another, of course, I assume Bitcoin halving cycles. I assume in 2 years' time will be, who knows, near 100,000 or a zero. Not financial advice, we forgot that. But
I still give the disclaimer.
Oh, good. But
it's changed though. It just says don't buy moonbirds.
That's all the info you needed from day one. But look, it might go to 250k, and then the floor, and then we might be talking about a bear market at 90,000 US dollars. These things just repeat over and over again. The story that we tell ourselves this week is that finally an ETF is going to get approved. We've heard this story before. Probably, I think I've heard it 3 different cycles, actually. We've had Grayscale, we've had Gemini, we've had so many try. And yes, BlackRock being BlackRock, and with the timing of everything, it seems a bit strange that they would come out, and then all these other companies as well. But I believe SEC will, of course, push it out like they always do. So I think the thing is they have to reply within 45 days. But normally what they do is wait till the end of that, and then they're allowed to appeal or something, and that gives them 270 days. So that's what will happen this time. And it all coincides with next year and the Bitcoin halving and the narrative we can tell ourselves again. And who knows, but I continue to hold. I'm lucky enough that I have enough to eat and have a roof over my head. And I'm more than convinced that there's no better risk reward asset than crypto. Well, Bitcoin and a little bit of ETH. So I continue to hold and wait for that time that I probably don't even need to convert Bitcoin to spend it properly and easily.
Yeah. It is funny how, time in the market, or just, how long you've been around, gives you perspective. And even, last week when I felt like the Twitter timeline was almost at all-time lows,
Oh,
NFTs were bleeding and then
agreed.
crypto was bleeding. And then there was this, regulatory FUD and all this stuff's happening. And I think I actually replied to one of Ben Simpson's tweets because he was like, I'm so sick of, crypto getting dragged through the mud. And he was sort of flying the flag. And I said, like crypto's dead. And I said, this time last year, ETH was testing 1K because I remember I was the Will Ferrell meme with the red wine spilling all over himself at the time. You were probably on the receiving end of a bunch of
I
texts
remember those times.
as I was experiencing my first ever harsh crypto down cycle. And, this time around, I mean, I never like to see red. I much prefer to see green. Don't get me wrong. But, it's quite funny when you go through, you obviously mentioned 2020 with Bitcoin at $3,000 or $4,000 and, what the psychology of that would have felt like at the time as, we had all the COVID stuff going on as well. And I really went through it last year when like floors are dropping on NFTs like 30% in a day, ETH dropping like 20%. And then I wake up, I go to the Twitter timeline and it's like, the world's ending, and I look at ETH prices down like 4.7%. And I think I sent you the first time meme, right? Like with the rope, first time. So
Yep.
you have bestowed upon me the ability to actually send that meme to other newbies this time.
Yes, you have now gone through at least what I think the first half of a crash and feeling like it was all over. Like I've mentioned, I'm not sure this is or we've seen the low. I think maybe that 16K Bitcoin was the low for this cycle, but I think we've got, who knows on the crypto show what next week will bring. The fact that in this timeline, we've got Elon Musk and Zuckerberg ready to fight in the octagon. It's just an incredible timeline. So you can't rule anything out in this world. So I think we're in store for a lot more crypto stories to come this year. Some good, some bad. And I think we've probably still got a bit of blood to shed before we cleanse everything out and can start again.
Zuck and Elon. Who wins the MMA fight there? Lock them in the cage for a couple of...
You're an MMA fan. You tell me.
I think as much as I'd want Elon to win, I think I got Zuck at $1.72 and Elon at...
It's very specific.
I don't know, 250 maybe, something like that. I don't know.
I would agree. I think Zuck at $1.60 probably. You just see his post where he's been doing the army stuff and he's fit. He's been doing jiu-jitsu. Musk, we've seen... I think, do you remember the picture of him holidaying where he was white as a goat? I can't talk. You could have put my head on that, and that was me. I think he got a bit of fat shaming there and lost some weight and got fit again. He might be a brawler. He said he has been in street fights back in the day. But yeah, I give it to Zuck for sure. But I posted this morning saying I can see them doing a like Rocky, knocking each other out and then becoming the best of friends, starting some business and doing something great for the world.
Acquiring NFTeams and putting it to the moon, or yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about our proportion of the show with Bored Ape. Bored Ape has gone through, and Mutants going through what a lot of the other projects. I mean, they've been going through it already, but they were holding on to that sort of 40 to 50 range at Bored Apes. They're now in the 30s to high 30s range. And Mutants are down to sort of mid sevens. We have seen this movie before with Bored Apes, maybe not as low as 35, 40, but we've seen many times in the last 12 to sort of 14 months where Bored Apes would get around that 50. They would sort of test that 50 range and then I'd shoot back up to sort of 60, 70, etc. Have they got another bounce in them, Steve? Like, I certainly don't see them bleeding down too much lower, but but as a holder still, I mean, you obviously have one of the best ones in the whole collection, but
the best one. Thank you.
Yeah, give us your thoughts.
I think it can go lower. I think the entire market can keep going lower. I think mutants are under 7 now. We will be buying, our community funder, NFTeams, will be buying a mutant very soon. We've been staking the ape and then have enough ape almost to buy a mutant. If ape stays at the price as well. But look, we've seen it time and time again. And I remember it was a year and a bit ago that it was 150 ETH floor. And that was just before the other deed sale. And it's just been declining along with the market. I think we've seen a few times where a simple fuck it from Yuga has sort of exploded everything. But the story to tell about Bored Apes and mutants at the moment, there's no sort of upcoming drops. And whereas all these other projects seem to have drops come in, so people are going towards those at the moment. But what I can see happening is next week after, we're going to have Heavy Metal game come out. Then they'll drop wherever Ape Fest is next. And then there'll be something else as a catalyst as well that they drop. So with all that, I still don't think it will skyrocket the price. We do also have, of course, Blur Lend-In and that whole market still playing out. So, yeah, while I see a lot of info coming from Yuga in the next month, I don't think it'll have the impact that it's had before. So I think we'll probably see it stay in this 30 to 45 ETH range for a while. And I think until we have other deeds, metaverse up and running, games go in there, the ape sinks actually showing a purpose for ApeCoin, we're going to see a slow bleed of the entire market. In saying that, of course, you've had Azuki's bucking the trend, and I think we're going to talk about them later. But for now, I think they're fairly valued. I think the last time they were at, like you mentioned, 60, 70 ETH price was 1,100. So if you do the USD determination, they're still pretty close or up a little bit from there. But who knows? For me, it doesn't matter. I'm holding mine and a few other. I've got a heap of Yuga assets that I'm going to hold. Don't plan to sell. And I think we saw Steve Aoki sell a couple of mutants today. So that will signify the bottom based on his trading history. But yeah, it's interesting. Like I'm more likely to buy than sell it at this price range. What are your thoughts on the sort of price at the moment, where it's going to go? What you think of the whole Yuga ecosystem?
Well, I mean, I love the Yuga ecosystem. I feel like a big part of why I'm still, here today chatting about NFTs was because I just had that Bored Ape ride of a lifetime that, opened up. The best thing was, as simple as it was the first ever decentralized app that I interacted with besides OpenSea was writing on the bathroom wall, right? And I just, I tell this story all the time, but the unlock in my brain to go, wow, like, hang on a minute. So they don't know my email address. Like, I just, I verify I have this token and I get to do this thing that someone else doesn't get to do. And this is when, like, Bored Apes were at like a 1 ETH floor, right? This is crazy, going back in time. So I suppose I just wanted to share that story to say that I'm a big, I have sentimental value for Yuga in my own journey.
And you went to the first Ape Fest as well, didn't you?
I'm trying to think. Was the first one in 21 or 22? I think the first one might have been 21. In 21.
Yeah, no, so you went to 22.
I was 22, yeah. The same night I got to see Snoop and then Madonna with the World of Women the same night. But I think I said to you off air, I'm considering a mutant. And shout out to Secure D, who's been a guest on this show, who I feel like is my number one person for fighting mutants. He does not like the mutants, but so shout out to Secure. But look, maybe I'm a buyer at 6 or 7, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't mind getting back in there. I have some other deeds. I don't have any heavy metal. One of the things that we've seen, in particular over the last couple of months with the introduction of heavy metal is like, Yuga spreading themselves too thin? Some people have even sort of gone as far, which I don't agree with, but they're gone, oh no, it's Pixel Vault again. It's Punk's comic and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I think that's a little bit too far.
That's harsh.
But that is harsh. But ultimately, like, diluting an already contracting collector base, I think, is probably, I don't know. It's a hard one, isn't it? I mean, you talked about your own thing with players and like trying to launch in this market, and as a founder or as a founding team, you can only hold on or sort of wait for so long, right? Like to certainly like to drop things. And I think you probably hit the nail on the head around the other projects that I wanted to bring up in a second, around Azuki's, the captains, everything that Frank de Gods is doing with Utes and D Gods. They do feel like they're sort of have all got these catalyst events, or they all do a tremendous job of keeping anticipation going. Not that I think Yuga's dropped the ball on that. I mean, their videos that they're still teasing out, like Yuga's still doing Yuga, right? Like, the classic video, what they say, build, flex, fight, evolve the other day with the heavy metal video. It's not like Yuga's doing anything different other than maybe like diluting or putting more assets onto the market in a contracting holders base. But I do think those that are collecting NFTs right now, or blur farming them, are looking for catalyst events that's going to sort of hold the price, or at least increase it. And I've said this to Kevin multiple times now with Moonbirds and Proof, and said it on a Spaces a few weeks ago. Like, you just have to. I mean, I think, many projects, including that one, have shown that they don't want to play the anticipation or hype game, but it's somewhat of an attention and hype game, isn't it? When you're in a bear market like this, you're competing for scarce attention and scarce amount of wallets. Yeah,
but if all you've got is the anticipation of the next drop, that has a half-life. So yes, exciting the first time. So we got dogs. Okay, those are owned Bored Apes. We got them dogs. And then that was exciting. And then, of course, the fuck it tweet, Mutants Sunday.
Most iconic tweet in NFT history.
Yeah, that will be a question in the future to know if you were in the NFT space early on. And the hype for Mutants was just insane. Like, I think Mutants Are Insane was another thing that was happening on Twitter at the time. Of course, then the recent ones, you had the Dookie Dash, other deeds. Now you've had all these things, and there's now hundreds of thousands of assets. So the half-life and the excitement of another drop keeps getting less and less. And so far, the gods, Azuki have the beans, but of course, that's still only all up a 20,000 collection. Memeland or whatever as well has a smallish collection. But they need more tricks than here's a new NFT that we're going to drop you. So I think Yuga is past that. They're like, all right, that's played out. Now we're building what we're really building, and now we're going to show you gaming. We're going to show you the ecosystem and so on. But you've also got to think that this heavy metal game, it's not meant to be a full game, and I think that's what people are assuming. It's a mini game to get your little characters into their next character. So they've built, I think there's 30,000 of these, if I'm correct, because Mutants and Bored Apes got them. So we had Dookie Dash, which was a very fun mini game. Before that, of course, we had that other Mutants vs. Ape games. And these are all games that they'll run for a month, and then you're never allowed to play again. it would be interesting to still be able to go back and play them and see the numbers on those. This game will be exactly the same. It will be open for a month, and then they will evolve into their next thing, and then there'll be another mini game, and then it'll evolve into the mech. So these are all just tests and fun things while they're really building the other deeds or other side, whatever it is. But yeah, I think people get too in the moment, and FOMO is the biggest driver of this space. But as we mentioned before, I'm thinking many years in the future, and I'm taking the bet on Yuga instead of all these other projects. They've got the funding, they've got the history of being the real first PFP that built a proper community. You've got the punks, but that's almost an art-based community. That all they are is the NFT, whereas the Bored Apes were the first to actually have gaming, have all this other stuff being built around it. So I'm more than happy to wait. I feel I'll be in for a big winter, which it has been. But again, 3 to 5 years, I think we'll be able to sit back and say the right call was to just sit and hold and wait for them to actually build out what they've been building.
Well, the interesting thing has been, I'm sure you've seen it because you've got some exposure to some pretty iconic NFT artists in your own wallet, including Beeple. But art has held up much better, obviously, versus the PFPs, and I've really enjoyed going down the rabbit hole with a number of, the iconic NFT artists to learn about just the culture and the backstory of like a lot of things, whether it was Trevor Jones or Josie Bellini or Coldy and all these people. Yep. So I actually did an interview with Giant Swan, the VR artist out of Melbourne earlier this week as well. Yeah. So, I've definitely picked up a few art pieces in the last couple of months, like at a decent price. And, I'm sort of taking some learnings from that, but they are very illiquid too, right? Like it's you're not going to be able to get in and get out as quick as you can with the momentum game with PFPs and things like that. But again, going back to what we were speaking about before, I think there's just so many verticals to digital assets or collectibles or NFTs, whatever we want to call them. There's just all these subcategories. You just can't bunch everything in together.
No, and it's almost, and I think I've made that decision that I'm now a Yuga maxi in regards to PFPs and, of course, NFTeams, but it takes too much effort to then go look at all these other projects. And it's another reason I haven't got into Bitcoin ordinals. You've only got such a limited amount of brain space to be able to deal with this. And artists was where I started. And I do keep an eye on a few artists that I like. And if prices drop, of course, I'm going to buy as well. But yeah, it's just there's only a limited amount of time in your life that you can concentrate on things in this space. So eventually, and even the swoosh stuff, I haven't been able to get into it. One, they're not allowing Australians to have a wallet. But even if I could, it's just another thing and it's too much. So, and I'm fine to leave that alone. Like I'm fine. Maybe I could have made a profit flipping Azuki's or Beans or Meme Land or anything, but I'm fine to leave it alone because I just don't have the brain space for it.
Yep. All right. Well, speaking of Azuki, they have their event in Vegas I think it's next week. It's coming up in a couple of days. Azuki is actually, as you mentioned before, and we've said it on this show, over the last couple of months, it's really been bucking the trend of floors bleeding a lot, besides the captains and D-Gods and Pudgy Penguins as well, we should give a shout out to. But Azuki's still hovering around that 16.5 to 17 ETH price point right now. And this event that's coming up, I remember when they dropped Beans, it was one of the very few times that the floor actually didn't retrace. And we normally see an event happen and then, or a reveal happen, and we see a floor dump, right? We see a retrace in the floor. What do you think happens after Azuki's event in Vegas? Are we going to still be hovering around 16, 17, or are we going to see it retrace maybe down to 12, 13 range?
So I have no idea. As I mentioned, I have no idea what they've been building. So maybe you can enlighten me. Like, I know they update their website with some cool features and so on. Have they revealed anything of like the garden? I know they, again, the website with a couple of images, but I really do not know what they've been building, or has it just been we're building the event, the Chase the Rabbit event, and then we're going to start showing. So will this be another check your wallets type event? I really have no idea. So I don't know what's going to happen here. I would love to hear your thoughts and sort of educate me on what the project is. I know the community is so strong. So they've got some huge whales in that community. And I think no matter what, they will keep it afloat because there are some really big whales, probably more so than like Bored Ape ecosystem in the Azuki community. So I think the chance of a retrace to lows like 12, 13, maybe not. Like I think there might be a few ETH shaved off, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm not in the weeds on in the garden. There's a little pun, but we had Wales Swoosh on, who's heavily involved with Azuki a couple of weeks ago, and his thoughts were really just the stickiness, obviously, of the community. There doesn't seem to be much else other than the Zagabond FUD that happened. The community, like it was one of those pivotal moments, right, where the community ended up rallying around. I mean, a lot of people got out still, and I remember I think we saw five or
like
six.
Six,
yeah, it's around about that mark. And then it's been. I've been surprised, like how strong it's been to buck the trend, because I probably still batch Azuki in what I would call the OG wave of projects with Bored Apes and with the stuff that we saw throughout 2021. I know what Azuki minted was it January 2022, I think it was.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like almost a year after Bored Apes.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, in a way, it's
I would say second wave.
Yeah, in that second wave, but whereas D-Gods and Utes feel like a bit of a new kid on the block, even though they were on Solana for a while, right? And then even like the emergence of the captains and then Pudgy Penguins are obviously an OG collection, but then they had this reincarnation when Luca Nets bought them. So I've been surprised that Azuki has been able to capture or remain and have the attention, particularly as Zagabond is not overly out there as, say, Frank the Gods or Luca Nets or even Ray from Meme Land. Like, those ones are in the weeds still. Frank the Gods is still, I'd listen to him on a Twitter Spaces where it was like, I don't know, it was 6 or 7 o'clock on a Thursday night, our time, and I was just eating dinner and I was like, oh, I'll just check it out. It was actually really good. And I'm like, where is he in the world right now? He said, I'm in LA. I look up the time in LA and it's like 3:27 a.m. in LA, and he's still on Twitter Spaces, still, taking every question and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know with Azuki, to be honest, a little bit of a head scratcher for me, but I'm happy for their holders. I think it's it's actually it's refreshing. It's good. The art is pretty good. So moving on, as we wrap this up, we did talk a little bit.
Sorry. Just before that, I have mentioned that I would never, during that FUD phase and what happened of just rugging all these other projects before Azuki took off. It was funny this week, just the other day, to see, is it Alina, who was also a resident. I don't know what the job title of Whale.Swoosh and Alina was, but it's more, they just talk about the ecosystem, and they were paid by Azuki to do that. She had tried to release a project, had apparently copied some art, and there was big uproar. And then Azuki came out and said, we're not going to renew her contract. And that sort of gave me a bit of a chuckle, and a sort of don't throw rocks in glass houses or something like that, because this is exactly what Azuki started as. And yeah, it was just really interesting to see that story right before. I believe is it tonight or tomorrow they're meant to have the party.
Yeah, I think it's very, very soon. And you know what? I didn't even know that about Alina, that had happened. So you worried about not knowing what was going on in the world of NFTs before we went on air, and then you've just dropped some news that I was completely unaware of. So
Oh,
you're
really?
back. You're officially back.
I never left. I was scrolling Twitter this whole time.
You poor thing.
Yes.
All right. So as we wrap up, we need to preview. You and I are actually going to see each other in person this time next week in Melbourne. So we are part of a NFT panel for Australian Blockchain Week on Friday, the 30th of June. We will be up on stage with Catherine, aka STEM Queen, and Stacey Ann Pearson, who's the head of Web3 for APAC region for AWS. Steve, you and I had a brief Zoom with Stacey Ann, I think, last week. Yep. She was quite impressive, been around in the space since 2016. Really looking forward to that one. And we will be seeing each other for the first time since, the tennis
Aussie
earlier
Open
this year.
6 months ago. I haven't booked my flight or my hotel yet. I should get onto that. But yeah, it'll be really good to see you there and take this show sort of live. I think what are we talking about? We did have a talk about what we were going to talk about, but I've completely forgotten.
I've got all my notes here, but the listeners won't be getting that alpha because we need to actually have the panel first. Otherwise, no one's going to come along. We can't just preview the whole thing. But
I believe it's already sold out. And you know what got me? I did not know that we were meant to speak at 9:35. I am not a morning person. So I'm going to have to get there at like 7:30 a.m., which is when I'm just going to sleep normally. So it's going to be exciting. I'm going to have at least 3 shots of coffee. Lucky it's in Melbourne where they do have great coffee. But when I saw the time, I was a bit sad.
Yeah, you're going to need a couple of double espressos, but we have a breakfast as well. I think that morning that you're welcome. I
probably won't make.
So yeah, so if you are around Blockchain Week starting, I'll be actually up in Sydney from this Sunday. So if you're around and want to catch up, we actually have with Upside. Steve mentioned a new role that I'm doing with Kyle Walker at the moment at Upside. We have a community drinks at the Squires Landing on Sunday afternoon. So if you want to be involved with that, I think if you go to Upside's Twitter or mine, you'll find it in a recent tweet. You just got to register there. It's a free event there. And I did want to give a little shout out to a NFT treasure hunt, what we're calling an NFT treasure hunt, where we're going to be using Chainalysis tooling to essentially play Zach XBT and hunt down not necessarily every scammer and grifter in the space, but if someone did get hacked or if someone lost an NFT, where that might have been sold into, and then the whole work. So playing essentially NFT stolen investigator.
Just on that, today I clicked on my first scam link on Twitter and connected my wallet. I shat myself. I had to go look at revoke.cash and see if I had signed anything, but it was a 10K TF tweet. I must have still been asleep, and under it I saw something and just clicked, and it was battle.town, but just the T's, it was double T instead of TL. And yeah, so just always be careful. I always thought, no, I'm too clever to ever click on. I think it takes 1 second. And your favorite NFT guy, Kevin, it has proven that if you're not paying attention. So yeah, I guess we just have to always reiterate to pay attention and make sure you're clicking safe links. What else were you doing with AWS? I remember you mentioned something.
Yeah, so we have a couple of events and activations with AWS. So they're on board as a partner of Upside, which is great. They're supporting Upside's endeavors. And I don't know if I've spoke too much about Upside on this show over the last couple of weeks, but the TLDR there is it's founded by Australian crypto founders in general, and they're writing checks for Australian Web3 startups. But on top of that, there's also a physical space here in Melbourne in Cremorne, which is like a Web3 hub. Probably a way to frame it would be WeWork for Web3. It's certainly not as big as a WeWork building, but what we compete on is the water cooler combos, right? Opposed to the kombucha. And what I mean by that is everyone in the building is in some way, shape, or form, involved with Web3, whether they're a developer or a founder or a marketer, whatever it is. But it's a really fun place to be. We had an event with Coinbase this past Wednesday talking about Coinbase's layer 2, the base. So we had about 70 odd people at that. So if you want to check that out, I've been doing coffees and tours for everyone that wants to check that place out. So if we have time, Steve, when you're down next week, we'll bring you through.
Yeah, it's been very impressive, all the work you've been doing. I mentioned that at the top of the show, but just UpsideDAO, articles, podcasts, you're just going nuts. It's awesome to see. And I think we can end it with great to be back. I hope we can continue on these maybe every fortnight or we'll see if we can do every week. Next week, no. But I also look forward now with all your connections to getting some amazing guests on as well, because I hate talking, but you're such a great interviewer that you just make me never shut up.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words. I haven't had a compliment for 6 months, so I'll take that one. But we have to do your favorite part of the show that you've obviously been missing the most, Steve, is the disclaimer, which we've got down from 410 pages in the very first show to this one now. Whatever you've heard on today's show is not financial advice. It never will be. This show is for informational and educational purposes only, and entertainment. And great to have you back, Steve. And we will see everyone not next week. We are going to have a week off next week because both of us are going to be very, very busy next week. We'll see you back the first week of July. Until then, we'll see you.
See you later. Good stuff.